fantastic. All right. The first thing I'm going to do is have the panelists go down the line, and the challenge that I sort of prompted them with was I wanted them to share a case study, like a brief, 2-minute case study of a project they'd worked on in the space. But that was, to make it a little bit harder, I challenged them to think of a situation where it maybe didn't work out and what the key learning was. Because I think it's, kind of boring to get up here and say, we did this thing and it was great. I mean, sure, kudos. But what I really want is for folks to talk about something where they learned, where they might have had a misstep or something they would do differently. So with that as the first prompt, I will kick it off and we'll just go straight down the line. So Matt, you're in the hot seat.
Alrighty. Matt Blumenfeld, I work at PwC. I'm the lead for digital assets and Web3 in the US. So we launched an internal project because we're not allowed to talk about some of the things we've worked on externally, so I'll focus on our internal involvement here. But we launched a platform for learning and engagement to help upskill people across the firm in digital assets, Web3, metaverse, all these interesting topics, emerging technology, if you will. And so we launched this platform. We have a token behind it where we incentivize people and reward them for their engagement, for doing learnings. We've seen a huge uptick in the people that take these courses versus our standard methods of learning. But it's really the community that we've built and the engagement around it that's been successful. One of the challenges we had early on is just generating content. So we've sort of created a flywheel where we incentivize people to generate the content that's then reviewed using the token. So we've sort of turned a negative into a positive here. And we give out things like going to conferences or dinners with senior executives at the firm, or we actually created something internally, a punk, if you will. I'll put that in air quotes in case there's any copyright infringement there. But of people so that they could identify themselves as experts or subject matter specialists in the space. And so it's been quite successful. Obviously, there's been road bumps, road hurdles along the way. But one of the things I'll say that we learned from it is you have to stay authentic. You don't want to change your brand story. You want to enhance it with this technology. And so, one of the things we've implemented at clients as we help them with their strategy and whatnot. But I'll pause there.
That's a fantastic example. 2 things real quick. I love that the company culture you have is such that people are actually competing to have dinner with executives as opposed to kind of running away. So that's definitely a mark in PwC's favor. And I also have to say, as somebody who's worked on projects with PwC, I never thought I would hear the word punk and PwC in the same sentence. So already we've learned something new. All right, go ahead, Jackie.
Hey, I'm Jackie. I'm the head of Web3 and Innovation at Warner Records. I've worked on a handful of different artist projects, one of them being with Alice in Wonderland when I was in management in 2021, where we had a token-gated Decentraland event. And then I've also worked with partners like Medallion on various artists, fan clubs. But most recently, what I kind of want to highlight is a project I did with a K-pop group called aespa. And we actually didn't do this on chain. The hurdle was they were really concerned about NFTs and didn't want that blowback. So we basically gamified, fan loyalty. Every day you had to stream and share the song. And if you did, there was different levels that you would end up in and win different rewards and prizes. So really just engaging with fans, finding our super fans and then finding ways for them to engage and grow deeper connections with the artists is really what I focus on. My biggest hurdle these days is just NFTs frightens people. So getting really creative to showcase, everything I do is still the Web3 ethos, and just making sure you find ways to engage fan bases and show them why digital goods or NFTs are important and then slowly roll those back out.
Yeah, and we're going to dive a lot deeper into that because I think there's a lot of questions to be had about or conversations to be had about semantics and the term NFT. So we'll definitely dive deeper, but I do want to keep going down the line and let everyone share their case studies.
So hi everyone, my name is Adi Abili and I'm head of Web3 for AB InBev. So that might be a surprise that we do have a Web3 department at AB InBev. I handle all the initiatives generally for our Web3 strategy, but my main focus is on a video game that we're building in-house internally that has Web3 foundations in the game. So the game itself is called Reign of Titans. It's a card battler strategy game, and the characters themselves that you play within the game are NFTs or digital collectibles. So I think Matt and Jackie really touched on some of the pain points that we have, the hurdles that we've had coming into this space as AB InBev. For us, The first 6 months, I don't know what went right, if I have to say, all the challenges that we had. It was really tough to start. But I think that the biggest learning for us is that in November of last year, we had an NFT drop as part of this game for the characters that you use in the game. And we believed that we were going into this NFT drop in a very strong position, very confidently thought that we weren't even going to make it to a public sale, and how naive we were going into this situation. It was actually a terrible drop. We did manage to sell out. Thankfully, we managed to sell out. And it was such a learning for us because it was so clear that people needed transparency, people needed trust when it comes to the Web3 space, especially when you're a big brand or a big company coming into Web3. We were able, throughout the NFT drop and the preceding days, to actually offer that to our community that we've built around this game through Discord, but we had to really show ourselves, so much so that in fact we had to give our names publicly so that the community could look us up, so they really felt comfortable with who we were. But that was a very key learning for us.
All right, let's keep going.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Mina Salib, head of Web3 at Axiom Space. If you're unfamiliar with Axiom Space, we're building the first commercial space station, which is set to take over for the ISS by around 2030. So our focus, or my focus when I got brought in to lead up our Web3 division, was really to build our Web3 community, which for us, it's like, how do we give people a seat at the table and allow them to be co-creators of the next commercial space industry, right? As space becomes much more of a public to private endeavor, it's like, how do you make space practical? How do you not make it feel like space, right? Like, how can I tangibly allow people to participate in that future? So that's a lot of what I think about personally. For me, I try to build partnerships which make space much more relatable. Many times with artists, right, well-known artists in the Web3 space. And even that, right, when you make even really strong partnerships with platforms or artists, you fall into like many challenges, right? Like in terms of how do you actually onboard people? What actually makes sense for people? How do you make sure that trust and reliability, like you said, is at the forefront of what you're doing? So for me, one of the main learnings that we had with our last X2 mission, so a lot of our NFT drops or campaigns are tied to our missions that travel to the ISS, usually on an annual or biannual basis. One of the main learnings was you can make a really cool partnership, but if the way of onboarding is not there, you're not going to do well, especially in a revenue perspective. So you might get a lot of engagement on socials and things like that, but actually sales might struggle because people are not used to creating wallets. People are not used to your onboard mechanism, whatever you might choose. So for me, one of the main things is I didn't want to be one of the pitfalls that I had when we first did this last drop was we created our own marketplace, our own platform, and tried to walk everybody A through Z. And then what I learned from this is you don't necessarily need to own the platform. You do the right partnership with the right platform, and then you drive them through that because the platform typically has a user base that already engages with digital collectibles, digital products. So that's one of our main learnings, and that's what we're taking to our next AX3 mission, which is set to launch in January. So,
all right, amazing.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Brianne Coates, and I lead Web3 at Mars. Not to be confused with the planet Mars coming after our space speaker here, but perhaps some of the candy brands we all know and love, M&M's, Skittles, Snickers, etc. Surprisingly, we've launched a lot of Web3 initiatives, and you might ask, what would a Web3 initiative look like for a candy brand or a candy company? And I think a lot of that we'll start to uncover here in the panel today. Similar to Adi, I heard you say earlier about authenticity and trust in the space. Courtney, one of our biggest learnings and things maybe that didn't go so right was why a candy brand and why Web3. Yep. So for us, it's really about the ease. I don't know anyone in the audience that maybe plans ahead to buy a package of M&Ms. Anybody in the audience plan ahead for M&Ms? Okay. For the most part, it's immediate consumption, right? On the spot. So how do we connect then the ease of Web3 and purchasing these products making them culturally relevant and utilizing Web3. This is part of the loyalty program that some of the things we got right, some of the things not so much.
I thought you were asking who's going to buy it for Halloween and like throwing in a little promotion there, which I was like, hell yeah. These poor kids are going to try to trick or treat at my apartment, and I'm going to be like, sorry, I ate it all. And then last but not least, definitely, we have Joe Pace from ASICS, who is joining us via Zoom or another similar conferencing platform. I feel like Zoom is just the generic term these days. Anyway, he is joining us remotely. Thank you so much for dialing in. So yeah, do you want to go ahead and share your case study?
Of course, and thank you for accepting me remotely. I wish I could be there. Wish I could be in LA hanging with you all. Yeah, I'm Joe. I lead corporate development at ASICS and have led all of our Web3 endeavors over the past few years. And a similar example to some of the ones that we've already heard from, we actually launched a project. It was a Web3, I guess you could call it just NFT collection back in 2021 called the Sunrise Red NFT collection. And ASICS, we are all about sound mind and a sound body. We want to inspire people to be physically healthy, moving their bodies. We're typically known for our running shoes. And we got really excited about our shoes and created some, what I thought and what people internally thought were some really interesting pieces of artwork that we ended up selling as NFTs through OpenSea. And we learned pretty quickly that people don't want those. Maybe from us or from others. And so I think what we really took away from that was, as cool as your art looks, unless you're an artist and know what you're doing, there's probably worth making some value beyond just the visual appeal of the asset. And so we learned a lot from that. I honestly was really proud that we even got that off the ground that early. I mean, July of 21 was pretty early, I'd say, for most brands. And so for us, looking forward and building on that launch, we got a lot better and we've learned a ton, and we've gotten to a point now where we feel not only that we can actually execute and launch a project in Web3 from a technical perspective and getting internal approvals and all of that, but also do it in a way that delivers value and actually is a value that aligns with our brand. So yeah, check out the Sunrise Red NFT collection if you get a chance. They're pretty cool to look at. That's about it, though.
Well, I want to thank all the panelists for being vulnerable. It's not that easy to come up and talk about things that you've tried and put a lot of work into and put a lot of effort into that haven't worked maybe the way you've wanted them to. So I definitely want to commend everyone for sharing these examples. So I'm going to also do something that might embarrass myself a little bit, but it leads well into the next question. So I've seen a lot of really interesting examples of NFTs and loyalty, and the pushback that I seem to see a lot is, well, how is that different than just a loyalty card or a loyalty program on a phone app? So I will show off my Stranger Wines punch card. If you're ever in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, Stranger Wines, really good wine store. Don't ask me how long it took to accumulate all of these. But it's a thing I have in my wallet, and every time I go get a bottle of wine to have with dinner or to go to a party, they punch my card, and the 13th punch, I get a half-price bottle or something. And that is something we've been doing forever, right? We've had the grocery store cards that you scan. We've had, every time I go to the drugstore, I put in my phone number, and I get some reward, ostensibly. I have no idea. So there's been a lot of loyalty programs over the years that have had varying degrees of success. And the critique that I often hear of a lot of these NFT programs is they are essentially updated loyalty programs. There's nothing wrong with them, but when you think of cutting edge technology, you don't think of frequent buyer cards. So I know the panel will push back on this idea. So I would love to hear what your response is when somebody says that to you. When somebody's like, oh yeah, this is just my Starbucks rewards app, except with an NFT attached to it, right? So what do you say when somebody says that? And I'll let just folks kind of jump in and grab it.
I mean, I can start. I think for me it's a little easier than the rest of the guys because music industry is different. But for me, it's you're able to resell the NFTs. So in my mind, it's all right. If I'm the first person to listen to Taylor Swift, I get to get tickets to all of her shows. I get discounted on merch, all these access and utility points. I then have the choice to either resell that token and make money off of it, or I can keep it and just drive up that value. So I've always looked at it in the music industry is that, somebody who's early and a big fan to an artist, you can kind of grow with that artist and have value with it, where both you and the artist can earn money. So for me, that's the most important key, is that the resellable value of it.
But so break that down a little bit, because I also come from a music business background, and so I'm really curious about this. So one, with the Taylor Swift example, and I understand you're using her because she's well known, but that is somebody who has an extremely high resale value, right? We saw those concert tickets going for $20,000, $30,000 in some instances, right? So I think there is that sort of resale element already there, although maybe the chain of ownership is harder to prove with that. Two, I do have to say I love the idea of the cranky indie cred that I grew up with in the 90s of like, ugh, these guys were so much cooler on an indie, which I've said at least 500 times, sorry. But I like being able to at least prove that, right? I like being able to prove that and also monetize that. So yeah, talk to me a little bit about the first one, like spin out the resale example a little bit more.
First, just to highlight, when you're selling those crazy tickets for Taylor Swift, all that money is going to scalpers, none of that money is going to the artist who essentially deserves it. So that's kind of the one thing. And also, I think it just democratizes the ticketing system, which we all think is broken, and Taylor kind of pointed that out. But I think for the smaller artists, and this is a very big like Web3 kind of music logic, is that, in the music industry right now, you have casual listeners and super fans, and they're completely treated the same, and the way the DSPs, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, are basically targeting, the casual listener. So that super fan deserves more and wants closer utility and access to that artist. And trust me, the artist wants to give them that. Mm-hmm. So this is now creating that ecosystem. And I'm like you, where I used to always be that's why I work in music. I was very proud of the music I would find, and I'd play a friend a song, and then a year later, they'd be blasting on the radio, and I'd be like, I told you about this song. And they go, no, you didn't. Guess what? Now I can prove that. So social currency and clout, I think, is for me personally, and for you, I think is probably what's most appealing about
So I think the real use case for NFTs is pettiness. Love it. All right, go ahead. Go ahead, Matt.
I think it's also about the ownership, right? And I think you highlighted that in your talk there. But it's not only about the ownership from building that relationship between the content and the fan, but it's also about the consumer or the fan owning their own data as well, which you can do with an NFT, right? An NFT is just a container for data. It's a mechanism for verifying something. And in the age of deep fakes and misconceptions, we're seeing this around the globe right now, you can actually verify that piece of information, which I think gets to the point that you were just both talking about. And if you instill that ownership in someone, right? I own an NFT, I own the first time this Taylor Swift song was played, that's something that's meaningful that you can then, getting back to the social clout, you can build on that social clout and it's verifiable. So I think there's a lot to be said about that, and again, going to the fungibility of it after that, right? And maybe I'm using terms that I shouldn't be using, right? But I can go sell that to somebody else if I'm done with Taylor Swift and I'm moving on to the next artist.
I think if you're done with Taylor Swift, I think her fans bury you in a shallow grave somewhere.
I was reading the room and hoping that I could get away with that statement. But.
So for music, I get it, right? People are fans of artists. They're fans of creative, folks. For consumer brands, though, right? And I want to address, because we have AB InBev and we have Mars on the panel. I mean, I'm sure there are some people that are fans of the brown M&M, that Fox News went after. But I think generally people have a different relationship to consumer brands than they do to musical artists, filmmakers, folks of that nature. So how are you kind of looking at this and approaching it from like a fandom angle, or like tell me a little bit about how you're coming at this?
Courtney, I'm so impressed that you have a card and you knew where it was to pull it out and show the audience.
My liver disagrees with you, but thank you.
Oh. I can't remember a single login for any loyalty program I've ever signed up for. Does anyone in the audience know where all of their loyalty cards are, or reward cards are, or what they do? Likely not.
Nope.
So here's the thing. For consumer package brands like some of mine, the idea is forget the card. Forget remembering what your login is. Forget about all of the punches that you need to accumulate. Let's make it easy for people. And beyond making it easy for people, let's make sure that those rewards are something that impacts your daily life and something that's personalized and customized to you. So a reward that I give Courtney through M&Ms might be a very different reward than Mina gets through Starburst. And those are because, as Matt said, NFTs are a container of data. through the aggregation, the cleansing, and the analyzation of that data, I know who each of these people are, what their preferences are. So as a brand, I want to deliver to them something that's customized for you, something that speaks to you, something that's going to add value to your life. Not a 50-cent coupon, but a utility that makes your life easier and better. That's the power of a CPG brand with NFTs.
Tell me a little bit more about what, because you said it's not a coupon, but like what is the offer then? Is it some sort of branded partnership with another brand that someone might be interested? Like just sort of if you can share an example of that.
Partnerships and access.
Okay.
So through the brands, we can give access. For example, we have a lot of gum brands.
Sure.
We link gum to dental health.
Yeah.
How might we drive people to take better care of their teeth through chewing gum? And some of the ease and access that we talk about, like forgetting your card or not knowing a login to your loyalty program, we're achieving this and overcoming it because I'm in people's pockets. I'm in their phones. I'm in your Apple and Google Wallet, which means I'm collecting data in a very secure and safe and trusted way. But that allows me to get to know you without you having to do anything extra. I'm not asking you to do a thing.
Yeah, I would completely agree with everything that's been said here. And just to build on some of these points for us, particularly around the idea of ownership and then this idea of value, and where at a fundamental technology level, what you have with Web3 in terms of loyalty is very different to what we've seen before. If I think about the ownership piece and really building on what Matt said here, we're talking about people who can feel like they have some skin in the game. They can actually feel like they have an investment in what you're doing. So when you buy an NFT, or if you buy a digital collectible, and I'll use the example of what we're doing with Reign of Titans, you've come into a community that allows you direct access to us as a company, direct access to how the product is being built, direct access into what you consume, essentially, as a consumer. And that is something that is very different to how we've played it before in terms of loyalty programs and just general interaction with the consumer. The value piece of it is also so fundamental. I mean, we talked here now just about the idea that it's easier when you're talking about Web3 technologies, but easier with utility. And having Web3 allows you to change that utility very quickly. It allows you, as you say, to have it very personalized because of the amount of data. So fundamentally, from a technology point of view, having loyalty programs within Web3 are very different. And I would have been that person, a year ago that it would have been like, I can just use my card. I don't understand how this is different. I would have been that person until I understood the power of the technology itself.
So Joe or Mina, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I can just add one thing. I think to exactly what you're saying, it's much more on an emotional level. Like when you have a punch card, nobody says, I'm a member of XYZ coffee company, right? Like I'm not really co-creating anything. I just go in on my 10th time, they give me a cup of coffee. I don't really feel any sort of connection. I might go there more often because I want that 11th cup for free, but I don't really feel that connected. When people are part of an NFT community, like you're saying, it is a completely different experience, right? Like they are engaging with you as an executive or a director of the company, and they're able to have a two-way conversation with your brand, right? Give the input of what they want to see from your company, right? In a space perspective, what we're doing from a Web3, community perspective, really, you can't really get that type of access at any other space company going right now, right? Where you're able to actually engage with someone, that person is able to take that feedback that you want to see and either implement it themselves or bring it to, higher ups and say, hey, like I have 100 people that want this thing from our company, let's try to implement this, right? So it's much more of how do we create more of a two-way conversation as opposed to here's another email, here's another coupon, here's 20% off. It's like, that's only getting us so far. How do we take this conversation and this relationship with the consumer to the next level? We believe, I guess we all believe that that's how we do it with Web3.
And it's instant. When you start to talk about feedback that are coming from your community, it's instant feedback that you're getting. We throw a question out in our Discord around something to do with the game, and within 5 minutes, we have hundreds of responses of people saying, I want to see this feature, or I want to see it move in this direction. That's instant feedback, instant data, to your point, to make things better and offer more value and utility.
Joe, do you have anything to add to that?
I do. Yeah, and I think I would agree with all of those points. And I'd add, I think there's a really interesting opportunity for brands to kind of copy the Web 2 template that's already been proven and tried and tested over, however long loyalty marketing's been around. And all those examples, a punch card, an email list, any of those, they're all free. And I think an area to explore free NFTs that you're giving somebody a reason to collect something, to an earlier point, own something that you've given them and created the beginning of hopefully a long and flourishing relationship. And I think there's just a number of technologies out there that make it possible to give free NFTs at scale. And so I think not even having to cross the penny gap and not ask for a single cent for somebody to sign up for your Web3 loyalty program or some extension of your existing loyalty program that is powered by Web3, I think is a huge opportunity for brands, and free NFTs are very practical. I think there's a number of blockchains that make that possible. So I think it's really maybe adds some context.
Amazing. So I do want to remind everyone to please submit your questions on the app. We've got a couple that have come in so far that look great. I'm going to leave a few minutes at the end to go through these. But I wanted to move on to the next topic, which is how long is this going to take, right? I think we're in this room either because you were at the Adobe Summit and you got off on the wrong floor, in which case, greetings, or more likely, you're here because you believe in this technology, you work in this space, you are invested in this space, you have made at least the time commitment, if not the financial commitment as well, to come to this event. And it gets very tricky when you are someone who spends a ton of time in the future to then have to step out of that space and be like, oh, wait, not everyone's here with me. And so I want to ask the panel, what is the time horizon you're looking at for this? Is this technology, we already saw sort of the boom with NFTs a couple of years ago, kind of the market cooling off a little bit. I think that's just the nature of a hype cycle with an emerging technology. It is what it is. It's certainly not the death knell. It just is a process. But, I do think things are changing now. And so I want to understand from the panel, is this like a 2-year sort of out in the future, a 5-year out in the future, a 10-year out in the future, with the obvious caveat that no one can predict the future, but what's the time horizon for this? Mina, do you want to dive in first?
Yeah, I can start. I think a lot of it is based off of sentiment. A lot of it is based off of how the consumer feels at a given time about digital collectibles, about this now death word that it feels like NFTs, right? Like when people hear NFTs, they think of potentially, several negative connotations. So we try to play around with the word and digital collectibles and things like that. But a lot of it's sentiment-based and narrative-driven by media and how people feel about NFTs. The amount of titles I've seen on blogs, are NFTs dead? No, they're not dead. We're all here and we're talking about it. This is happening. It's happening now, and it's going to continue to happen. I do think a lot of it is based off of what each of you do at your corporations in terms of investing in the technology, right? And bringing your consumers on board. And how do you leverage the tech in order to make a more seamless experience for your current users? I think a lot of it is based off of, the adoption from a corporate level then translates to using that technology or, this seamless integration to help drive better experiences for your consumers. And I can see that happening, right? There's so much investment from so many Fortune 500s, but the more we get, the easier it will be for more traditional consumers to get onboarded. It could take 2 to 3 years to see that next bull run. I don't really know exactly when, but.
Okay, so you're saying 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, I could see 2 to 3 years, the next
3 years.
hype cycle.
Okay.
Not investment advice.
So 2 to 3 years. How many other people on the panel, just quick show of hands, think 3 years? Okay, optimists?
I think you have to define what you're looking for, right?
Okay.
I think you'll see things happen over the next 6 months, speaking, based on what I'm seeing both publicly and behind the scenes. But the way that you define success is different for every company. If it's revenue and ROI, some companies that were very early to this obviously saw a huge revenue boost. And I just don't see that happening over the next 6 months. But what you build today and build the foundation for what's coming, right? We all are here because we're excited about these emerging technologies and what it is in a year from now versus what it is 10 years from now. Obviously 10 years, we all believe it's going to be much bigger than it is in a year. But again, one of the things that was said on the panel earlier, success for them was defined as selling out the NFT launch, right? And that used to be the standard. I think that's changed now, where you can give out a free NFT, you can create a whole community, get all that feedback, and then do something even bigger with it. So for me, again, I think the PFP boom, that's done. We're moving past that, but a lot of what I'm seeing out of the companies building in this space, that'll be launched over the next 6 months. So it could be as soon as 6 months, but again, for this to be as big as it was in 2020, 2021, I think we're probably a little bit further away from that. But that, it depends on how you define success, in my opinion.
Yeah, Jackie, what do you think?
I'm looking more like the 3 to 5 year range, unless, let's use our best friend Taylor Swift as an example, decides to drop an NFT tomorrow. But by the way, she's not a Warner artist. But I think, no, I hope, no. I think for me, I think the big thing, and this is not a revolutionary statement, is that it's really up to gaming. I think they're the ones who could fast track this, but I think it has to be a really strong game, because the gaming world is the place where people understand digital goods and digital assets. They're basically buying these goods, using them, and that's it. So to me, I think that's the really big opportunity, and gaming has surpassed the music industry as a cultural influencer. So I think it's kind of on them how they want to onboard the masses. So yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I'm very glad that you said that. That's some validation for what we're doing for sure. But no, I agree. I think that gaming is really going to change how digital collectibles really do move forward. I'm somewhere on the 3 to 5 year horizon. Again, if you'd had asked me 18 months ago as AB InBev, we would have been looking in terms of 6-month horizons. We were doing NFT drops with our global brands, selling out very easily. And now we've completely changed our strategy and focused on this long-term value, where it really is an investment for us as a company into what we can bring long-term. But I do want to flag that I think it's very important when we're talking about this space and talking about NFTs that we understand this at a global level. Because our perspective at the moment in this room, or to our comments, is somewhat skewed towards America. Because if we're talking about horizons and timelines, we can look in other parts of the world and see that their timelines are probably shorter than ours, because they're just starting to onboard. And it can be areas where we can get it right in terms of the education to onboarding people. For example, we have huge pushes that we do in LATAM, because we see huge opportunity there in terms of people who desire digital collectibles and desire these NFTs, but don't yet have the technology in a place where they can do it. So I think it's company dependent, to your point, Matt, around strategy. It's regionally dependent, and it really depends on the case study that you're using it for as well.
Yeah.
And just one thing to add to that real quick, and then I'll stop talking. I think we're moving away from this being a transactional relationship, right? Web3 is about building the relationship with your consumer, and I think that's what I took away from what you just said outside of the regional part, which I totally agree with as well.
Yeah, 100%.
So I have one more sort of surprise question that came out of the conversation, and I'll let everyone kind of jump in on it. So, I was kind of thinking, what are some brands that I haven't seen doing much in the space that potentially could be really interesting and have that really strong loyalty, right? And somebody sent me a TikTok a few days ago of a woman saying that she was an Aldi's and Dunkin' girly, and she was going to fight the Target and Starbucks girlies. And I live in New York City, so we don't really have that stuff there. So I was like, is this Greek? I don't get it. But it really is that level of deep consumer identification. It's almost a little too much. So as far as I know, I don't think any of these brands have done much in this space. So my question for the panel is this: if you were Target, Aldi, Dunkin', or Starbucks, what's the first thing you're gonna do? You have this pretty rabid fan base, but it's mostly women. They are, I'm gonna generalize here and say they're maybe not as tech savvy or as gamified as maybe some other audiences. What are you thinking? Somebody's all right, let's figure out a strategy for this. What are you thinking? What are you gonna do?
I'll give a case study of something that I really liked. I think it dropped in 2022. But when Tiffany's partnered with CryptoPunks,
Right.
which was a really, and I think it kind of goes to this question. What they did was Tiffany's, I don't know who went to who first, but Tiffany's partnered with CryptoPunks and started creating pendants or medallions of Tiffany's would create a jewelry based off of the unique CryptoPunk the owner would have. And CryptoPunks, if you don't know, is like an NFT. It's one of the first NFTs that started the PFP revolution. These things were trading for $400,000, $500,000 at the peak. Obviously, it's maybe more, maybe $1 million, right? It's come down a lot since, but they
$1 million?
very high, a lot of money. But what they did was they created this exclusive collection with them where 250 out of the 10,000 CryptoPunks holders would be able to create these unique pendants that Christie's would make. Each of these pendants were going for about $50,000 each. But what did that do, right? It introduced the Tiffany brand to a brand new set of holders, potentially people that never heard of Tiffany's prior to this, but they knew it's something that's unique, it's exclusive, people wanted it, and drove a lot of eyeballs to the brand. So it's not necessarily like you have to create an entire collection for everybody that is a holder, but it's something that is exclusive, it's something that's unique, and it's leveraging what the brand is best at. Right? Tiffany's creates beautiful jewelry, exclusive beautiful jewelry, right? Premium jewelry. So it leveraged what they're best at and ultimately introduced their brand to a brand new group of future buyers or whoever it may be.
Joe, I want to make sure that we're not leaving you out being remote. So did you have anything to add to that question?
You're so kind. Thank you for thinking of me. I do wish I was there. It would be a lot of fun. But no, I mean, I think probably make some really cool donut art and call it an NFT and maybe call it a day. No, let's not do the Sunrise Red playbook. No, I think what would be maybe exciting in creating some type of community that is more explicitly for these people. And if that doesn't exist today, then there's probably a number of people. It seems like were shared something organically. If that exists at that level, I'm assuming there's probably enough people to create a Dunkin' Discord or a Dunkin', token gated group of some kind. And then listening to those people and letting them chat with each other and maybe try to, create exciting experiences that wouldn't exist outside of that community. And I think maybe really let that passion kind of be in a pressure cooker in a way and let it hopefully spread beyond just that group.
Could Ben Affleck be an NFT? I think is the question for Duncan specifically.
Just do an Affleck NFT, you're probably fine.
Affleck NFT, I like it. Yeah, go ahead.
Utility, utility, utility. I'm gonna have a hard line in the sand here to say what I really, really hope we start to see is that NFT rewards are very different in Web3 than we've seen in Web2. I'm not a fan of applying the same sort of program, the same strategy, the same perks and rewards that we saw in Web 2 into this new world. The level of data that we have, the new technology that we have, the closeness to our consumers and that one-to-one relationship, the co-creation of our brands, it enables us to deliver a far different sort of utility for a Dunkin' girly versus a Starbucks girly. Two very different profiles, two very different consumers, and now we get to give them rewards that are tailored exactly to them, and that builds lifelong fandom.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got 5 minutes left. I'm getting the little buzz. So we do have some great questions. So I'd love to at least get one or two audience questions in before we have to wrap up for the break. So the first one is specific actually to you. So with the Mars loyalty program, given that products are sold at countless retailers, how do you use Web3 to make it seamless for consumers to get credit for their purchases?
Great question. Have a wonderful answer for you. For the majority of our brands, we have loyalty cards that live in your Apple or Google Wallet. And what this means for ease for you is that you don't have to send us a receipt. You don't have to track it. I'm in your phone. I'm in your wallet. I can verify that if it's on-chain or off. If it is on-chain, then that helps us build out the loyalty program for you because now everything is being able to be seen and tracked. So anytime you shop, anytime you use your Apple or Google Wallet, it's automatically registered, very easy for you.
Awesome. So I want to do one more question, and this is more for the panel generally. And this actually goes to what you're saying about the digital identity and the data. What are the digital identity challenges that worry you with loyalty-based NFT programs today? And then how do you expect new challenges to appear over the time with AI, which that's kind of an interesting angle to take on it. So does anyone, we haven't talked about AI at all on this panel, but that is kind of the buzzword and it's part of the broader metaverse. So how are people thinking of AI in relation to NFTs? And I think that's bingo for buzzwords, by the way.
I'll just say scams, right? Like, one of the biggest problems that plague this industry is scams. I stopped picking up calls. I don't check Discord messages that I don't know of a specific person that I'm actually connected to. So, you know, ultimately, hopefully we can leverage AI technology to fight AI technology. Right? That makes sense? Because you're going to get a lot of deep fakes. You're going to get a lot of people pretending to be. I remember one time I got scammed, and then I had scammers trying to help me. Right? Scammers trying to help me. I'm just like, this is wild. This is wild. But ultimately, I do think that the technology is powerful enough to leverage blockchain tech to be able to have some sort of trust layer and be able to identify if this person is real, if this avatar is real, or whatever it may be. So combining AI and blockchain, I do think we'll be able to use it for good as opposed to bad. But I do think that the deep fakes and things like that do create negative sentiment in the industry.
Anyone else have thoughts on AI and the intersection?
I'm excited to see AI make our lives simpler. I think we all live in a chaotic life. Everyone's under a ton of stress. We have a lot going on. If we can leverage AI specifically within NFTs that can then automate different elements of our lives that give us access to higher cognitive power to do things we're passionate about, that's the sort of life we're trying to build.
Yeah, and I think one of the inherent benefits of blockchain technology is the immutability of it. So you can use blockchain to track data that is, and you can stamp it using an NFT, that's used for models in AI. So you understand where that data came from, when it was created, who created it, and you have all of that on the block, right, on the blockchain. So you have that immutability there. So I think that's a huge advantage. And just to answer the former question about what you can do to help build out your strategy, I had a very simple answer for it. Call PwC. It's what we do. But I'll leave it at that, and we can talk about details after.
All right. Does anyone have a final comment? Adi, did you have something?
Oh, just on this question around digital identity, I do believe that it's going to be getting easier for us actually instead of more challenging. I think more people are going to be willing to give over more data. In the beginning, in this space, there seemed to be such an adverse reaction to want to show themselves at all. In anything to do with Web3. Everybody's anonymous, you don't know where you're sending money, or you don't know where you're sending assets, but there seems to be a willingness to move away from that, especially as we start to onboard more brands, more companies into the equation. We'll have to give more data. I think AI is going to have an amazing impact, as you say, in terms of making things easier. I think the biggest challenge that we'll see with AI is going to be in the creative process. And perhaps diminishing that. So I think that'll be a challenge and maybe a tipping point that we'll see in the industry going forward.
All right. Well, I feel like we could keep going for another half hour at least, but it is 10:30, and that is unfortunately all our time for today. I want to thank this amazing panel, and thanks especially to Joe for his patience and being remote, but thanks to everyone for chatting. It is now time for the break. We've got about an hour and 15 to hang out, so thank you so much, everyone.